In history, there are times when the world holds its breath, when everything we know falls apart and a hidden enemy appears from the shadows to change everything. For over 1,000 years, the Mediterranean was home to giants, the smart Egyptians, the strong Hittites, the rich Mycenaeans. They built huge monuments, made friends across lands, and believed their empires would never end. But then, a new kind of fear began to spread. Not a rival king, not a natural disaster, but something much worse. A never-ending wave of destruction that swept across the ancient world, leaving only ashes and questions. Who were these ghost-like invaders? Where did they come from? And how did they manage to break down an entire global system, pushing humanity into hundreds of years of darkness? Get ready to dive into the heart of the Bronze Age collapse and face the chilling puzzle of the Sea Peoples. To really understand how big this disaster was, we first need to see how amazing the world was before it. Picture the late Bronze Age, around 1,300 years before Jesus was born. This wasn't just a bunch of small groups, it was a smart, connected world. Giant ships loaded with precious goods sailed between continents, carrying stories and secrets from land to land. From the rich lands of the Nile River to the sunny coasts of Greece, from the mountains of Turkey to the plains of Mesopotamia, big empires were thriving. The Egyptians, with their giant temples and golden kings, had tons of wealth. The Hittites, who were experts at using iron and chariots in war, ruled over Turkey. The Mycenaeans, famous for their palaces and strong ships, controlled the Greek seas. And in places like Ugarit, busy cities helped trade goods between the East and West. Leaders talked to each other, trade routes were busy, and a shared culture of rich people connected these powers. They spoke the same languages for business, traded fancy gifts, and even married into each other's families. It was a careful balance, a complicated network of power and wealth built on hundreds of years of peace. But underneath all this shine, problems were starting to appear. The first signs of disaster weren't sudden, they were small, sneaky problems. Changes in weather brought long, dry spells, leading to widespread hunger and unrest among the people. Earthquakes knocked down cities and stopped trade. Inside the empires, people were unhappy and rebelling, caused by money problems and political fights. And then, the first hints of a new danger started to show up from the edges of the world. Old Egyptian writings, especially the Merneptah stelae from around 1208 BCE, talk about a group of foreign invaders. They weren't described as normal armies, but as a team of different peoples moving with a scary, unstoppable goal. They were called the Peoples of the Sea. These early stories show how desperate things were. Pharaoh Ramses III bragged about beating them, but his words show he was very afraid. These weren't just raiders, they were moving entire families, their belongings, and their endless hunger for new lands. The old empires, used to normal wars, were not ready for this new kind of enemy. Then, around 1200 BCE, the whispers turned into a loud roar. The full force of the Sea Peoples movement hit the ancient world like a giant wave. Digs by archaeologists across the eastern Mediterranean tell a chilling story that's always the same. Cities burned, often violently, and were never rebuilt. The destruction was total and swift. Ugarit, a busy port city in today's Syria, was completely destroyed. Its last clay tablets, baked hard in the fire that swallowed the city, talk about desperate calls for help, ships being attacked, and an enemy that came like locusts. The king's final message begged for help that would never arrive. Within days, the city was nothing but ruins. The mighty Hittite Empire, which once fought with Egypt, simply disappeared. Its main city, Hattusa, was left empty, its records lost forever. An empire that had stood for 500 years was erased from the map in less than a generation. No one knows exactly what happened in those final days. The Mycenaean civilization in Greece, with its strong palaces and detailed government, fell into a dark age that would last for hundreds of years. Their special writing, a sign of their smart system, vanished.
The great fortress palaces at Pylos, Mycenae, and Tiryns all burned at roughly the same time. Whoever did this wanted to make sure these centers of power could never rise again. Even Egypt, the strongest of the Bronze Age powers, was almost destroyed. Pharaoh Ramses III, in his temple at Medinet Habu, showed huge battles against these invaders. He drew them as different groups with unique feathered helmets and round shields, arriving by land and sea. He said he won, but Egypt was badly weakened and never got back its old power. So who really were these mysterious sea peoples? This is where history turns into exciting theories and smart guesses. The old texts list names: the Peliset, the Teker, the Shekelish, the Denyen, the Weshish. Some experts think the Peliset are linked to the later Philistines, which gives us a rare clue about where they might have ended up. But where they came from is still a big debate. Were they people forced to leave their homes because of hunger and dry lands in Greece? Were they soldiers who turned against their bosses? Were they a group of pirates and raiders all working together to steal and find new homes? Or maybe a mix of all these things? The most popular idea is that they were a mix of different groups, pushed by problems in their own lands and drawn by the rich, stable lands of the empires. They weren't one single people, but a desperate, moving force, armed with new ways of fighting and a cruel efficiency that crushed the old, strict empires of the Bronze Age. They were the ultimate game changers, a force of nature that history had never seen before. If you're finding this trip into ancient mysteries as exciting as I am, and you want to discover more amazing stories from history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Pillars of History family. Don't miss our next deep dive into the past. The Bronze Age collapse wasn't just an end, it was a harsh, messy beginning. The destruction caused by the Sea Peoples, along with other big problems, pushed the Eastern Mediterranean into a time often called the Dark Ages. Trade stopped, reading and writing became rare, and central governments broke apart. But from the ruins, a new world slowly started to appear. The fall of the old system made way for new inventions, especially iron. Iron was easier to find and use than bronze, leading to new ways of fighting and new kinds of societies. New peoples like the Phoenicians and the early Greeks began to create their own cultures and ideas. The Sea Peoples themselves mostly disappeared from history after their first destructive wave. Some might have settled down, blended in, or just spread out. But their impact is clear. They were the spark that broke a system that lasted for thousands of years, forcing people to change, invent, and finally build again. Even today, the Sea Peoples remain one of history's most fascinating puzzles. Their story is a powerful reminder of how weak even the biggest civilizations can be, and how quickly a complicated, connected world can fall apart. It teaches us that history doesn't just move forward in a straight line, it's a dance of rising and falling, creating and destroying. Their identity, where they truly came from, what happened to them in the end, these questions still drive archaeologists to dig and experts to debate. They are a blank space in our knowledge, a ghost-like threat that reshaped the ancient world and left a huge mark on how human civilization developed. And maybe that lasting mystery is exactly what makes their story so powerful. What are your ideas about the Sea Peoples? Do you think they were desperate people, mean pirates, or something else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing what you think. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Pillars of History for more deep dives into the epic stories and unsolved puzzles that shaped our world. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Bronze Age collapse. Until next time, keep exploring the Pillars of History.